The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark between three suns. It was bigger than most moons and housed the most important meeting in the galaxy. Today, 47 different alien species had come together for one purpose. They wanted to form the biggest military alliance the stars had ever seen. Ambassador Linda Morrison sat at a small table near the back of the giant chamber. The sign in front of her read, Observer Species, Earth. She wore her best blue uniform, but it looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor of the real council members. Humans were new to space travel. The aliens thought they were too weak and stupid to matter. Captain Jake Sullivan watched from the viewing deck above. His ship, the Horizon, waited outside the station with a small human fleet. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars. The scars on his face told stories of battles most aliens could not imagine. But here, he was just another primitive from a backwater planet. The chamber fell quiet as high. Counselor Vextar stood up. The tall gray alien looked like a walking skeleton wrapped in silver cloth. His voice came out as a cold whisper that the translation machines turned into words everyone could understand. My fellow beings, Vextar began. Today we make history. The Grand Alliance will bring order to the chaos of the Outer Rim. No more will savage worlds resist our guidance. No more will primitive species refuse to join civilized space. One by one. The alien representatives stood to pledge their support. The Krillian delegate, a creature that looked like a giant insect, promised bioweapons that could kill entire planets. The Synthetic Collective, machines that had destroyed their own creators, offered endless robot armies. The Psi Lords of Mentara, beings with huge brains and tiny bodies, volunteered their mind control specialists. Dr. Alan Cooper sat next to Morrison and took notes. He was Earth's top expert on alien behavior. While the others talked about weapons and armies, he watched body language. Some species cheered and clapped, but the older races, the ones who had been in space the longest, stayed very quiet. A few even looked scared. Each member species will contribute to our glorious campaign, Vexitar continued. Ships, soldiers, weapons, or resources. Together, we will crush the independent worlds that dare to stand against us. The alien crowd cheered. They talked about conquest like it was a fun game. They spoke of enslaving entire planets as if they were discussing the weather. Morrison felt sick listening to them, but she kept her face calm and professional. Captain Sullivan noticed something else from his spot above. Several of the older alien ambassadors kept looking at the human table, not with the amused contempt of the others, but with something that looked almost like fear. Why would ancient spacefaring races be afraid of humans? Vextar's cold eyes turned toward the back of the chamber. And now let us hear from our newest observers. Ambassador Morrison of Earth. What will humanity contribute to our Grand Alliance? The entire chamber went silent. Thousands of alien eyes focused on the small human woman at the back table. Some looked amused, expecting her to beg for mercy or offer pathetic tribute. Others waited with cruel anticipation to see how the primitive humans would embarrass themselves. Morrison stood slowly. She was not a tall woman, and her simple uniform made her look even smaller among the elaborate alien delegates. But when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast space. The United Earth government has carefully considered your proposal, she said. Her tone was polite but firm. Humanity respectfully declines to participate in your alliance. For a moment, no one moved. Then the laughter started. First a few chuckles from the younger races, then loud guffaws from the warrior species. The Krillian delegate made a sound like grinding metal that passed for laughter among his kind. The machine representatives calculated the humor value of human stupidity in real time. Declines? Vextar's voice dripped with mock surprise. Perhaps the translation was incorrect. Surely you meant to say that Earth eagerly wishes to serve the Alliance. Morrison did not smile. She did not look afraid. She simply repeated her words. Humanity declines. We will not help you conquer innocent worlds. We will not participate in your war. The laughter died away, replaced by angry voices. The Krillian hissed about human arrogance. A representative from the Titan clans roared something about crushing upstart primitives. The Psi Lords whispered among themselves, their large brains glowing with psychic energy. Dr. Cooper leaned forward in his chair. The older alien races were not laughing or threatening. They were having urgent, quiet conversations. Some looked worried. Others seemed to be trying to remember something important. Vextar raised a skeletal hand for silence. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. Then humanity will learn the price of defiance. When our fleets crush the outer rim worlds, Earth will burn alongside them. You will wish you had chosen wisdom over pride. Morrison began gathering her papers from the table. She moved with careful, deliberate calm as if she had all the time in the universe. The United Earth government formally withdraws from all Galactic Council proceedings, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens shouted threats and insults. Some demanded immediate military action against Earth. Others called for economic sanctions. A few suggested making an example of humanity that would terrify other primitive worlds into obedience. Through it all, Morrison continued packing her documents. Dr. Cooper stood and followed her lead. Captain Sullivan, watching from above, felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen that look before on the faces of soldiers who had decided that retreat was the only option left. Morrison reached the chamber's main exit before turning back. Her voice cut through the alien shouting like a knife through cloth. "We will be going now. Good luck with your war." The simple words somehow made the vast chamber fall silent again. There was something in the way she said them, something that made even the most aggressive alien delegates pause. It was not fear or defeat in her voice. It was something else entirely. As the human delegation walked out, scattered whispers rippled through the crowd. Ambassador Cathara of the Velian Confederacy, oldest of the council races, turned to her aide with ancient worry in her eyes. "Contact our archives," she whispered urgently. "Find everything we have about species that choose exile over war. Find it now." The chamber doors closed behind the humans with a soft hiss. Outside, Captain Sullivan was already preparing his ships for departure. But as his crew worked, he could not shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something far more dangerous than a diplomatic failure. In the depths of space, humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you forced a peaceful species to choose between fighting and fleeing. The aliens had no idea which choice would terrify them more. 3 months had passed since humanity walked out of the Galactic Council. The aliens thought humans were hiding in fear, preparing weak defenses for the coming war. They were wrong. Admiral Rick Barnes stood in the command center, buried deep beneath the moon's surface. Around him, hundreds of officers worked at glowing screens that showed the biggest military operation in human history. But this was not preparation for battle. This was preparation for something else entirely. "Colony Ship 7 has cleared the Jupiter checkpoint," reported Commander Lisa Wright. She was in charge of the secret evacuation. Her job was to move millions of humans to places the aliens would never find. "That makes 43 ships this week. All passengers safely aboard." Barnes nodded as he watched the massive display screen. It showed every human world, every space station, every colony. Red dots marked places already evacuated. Green dots showed locations still being cleared. There were fewer green dots every day. The plan was called the Exodus Protocol. Earth's greatest minds had worked on it for years, ever since first contact with alien civilizations. They had studied galactic history and learned a terrible truth. When peaceful species refused to join military alliances, those alliances usually destroyed them completely. But humanity had decided on a different path. Instead of fighting a war they could not win, they would simply disappear. Captain Roy Mitchell piloted his stealth ship Ghost Runner through alien space. His vessel was invisible to their sensors, built with technology that bent light around its hull. He had been watching the Grand Alliance build their war machine for months. The alien fleet was enormous. Over 10,000 ships from dozens of different worlds. Some were as big as cities, armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. Others carried millions of robot soldiers. A few had bioweapons that could kill every living thing on a world in hours. But Mitchell also saw something else in his secret reports. Refugee ships fleeing from Alliance territory. Entire species running away from worlds they had lived on for thousands of years. When his crew intercepted their communications, they heard strange stories. They speak of worlds that just vanished, Mitchell told Barnes during a coded transmission. Not destroyed, not conquered, gone. Empty space where planets used to orbit their suns. The refugees are terrified, but they will not say what happened. On Earth, Dr. Helen Foster worked in a laboratory hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean. She was putting the final touches on Project Darkstar. The weapon she built made hydrogen bombs look like firecrackers. But Darkstar was not meant to destroy the alien fleets. It had a very different purpose. The equations are perfect, Foster told her team. When we activate it, the effect will be instant and complete. No energy signature, no radiation, no evidence we were ever here. In the Centauri system, Ambassador Morrison read reports from across human space. The evacuation was going faster than anyone had hoped. Families loaded onto ships with only the belongings they could carry. They left behind homes, cities, entire worlds they had spent generations building. But they were not sad. They were excited. The hidden ships carried them to places beyond the galaxy's edge, to star systems that did not appear on any alien maps. Scout vessels had found worlds where humans could build new lives, far from the wars and conquests that filled known space. Dr. Alan Cooper studied alien psychology from his office on Luna Base. His research had revealed something important about the species laughing at humanity's retreat. The youngest races, the ones who had only been in space for a few thousand years, thought humans were cowards. But the oldest civilization stayed quiet. I found records of something called the Precursor War, Cooper told Morrison during a secure video call. It happened 50,000 years ago. A peaceful species called the Precursors faced the same choice we did. They also chose to leave rather than fight. Morrison leaned forward. What happened to them? According to the oldest archives, they vanished completely. Every world they had ever lived on became empty. The alliance that threatened them celebrated victory. Cooper paused, his face grave. Then the alliance started disappearing too. One species at a time over several centuries. The survivors say the precursors came back, but they were not the same anymore. The final phase of the Exodus Protocol began as the last civilian transports left Earth's orbit. Cities that had housed millions became ghost towns overnight. Schools, hospitals, factories stood empty but undamaged. It looked like humanity had simply walked away from everything they had ever built. Colonel Pete Davidson commanded the rear guard from Haven Station, a secret base built inside a hollow asteroid. His job was to make the aliens think humans were still fighting a normal war. He sent fake radio signals and moved empty ships around to create the illusion of military activity. Decoy Fleet 3 has jumped to the Beta sector, reported his communications officer. Alliance scouts detected them and are moving to intercept. They have no idea they are chasing empty ships. The deception worked perfectly. Alliance intelligence reported scattered human resistance and tactical withdrawals. Their generals planned campaigns against an enemy that was no longer there. Meanwhile, the real human population had vanished into the dark spaces between galaxies. General Susan Hayes prepared Earth's final gift to the aliens from her command bunker in Colorado. As Alliance forces finally broke through the outer system defenses, she activated the Prometheus Protocol. Every major city on Earth began broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. Admiral Barnes appeared on screens across the planet. His voice was calm and professional as he spoke to the advancing alien fleets. To the members of the Grand Alliance, you have claimed our territory and found it empty. You have conquered our worlds and found them abandoned. This is not defeat. This is choice. The message continued as alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Humanity chooses to leave rather than fight. But should you follow us into the dark? Should you seek us out beyond the rim? Should you threaten the innocent species we now shelter? Then you will discover why we chose to leave, rather than show you what we learned in the shadows between stars. As Barnes finished speaking, something impossible happened. Every piece of human technology in known space activated at once. But instead of weapons, they were deletion programs. Computers erased their own memory banks. Ships dissolved their own hull plating. Space stations dismantled themselves piece by piece. In minutes, thousands of years of human civilization simply ceased to exist. The aliens found empty buildings and basic materials, but no trace of the advanced technology that had brought humanity to the stars. Dr. Foster's final creation activated deep in Earth's core. The planet did not explode. It did not burn. It simply was not there anymore. Where Earth had orbited the sun for billions of years, Alliance scouts found only empty space and a small monument floating in the void. The monument was made of simple stone, carved with words in every human language. Here once stood the homeworld of humanity. We have gone where the light of war cannot reach. Do not follow. Admiral Theknor of the Krillian fleet stared at his instruments in confusion. His sensors showed a complete victory. Human space was conquered. Their worlds were empty. Their fleets were destroyed or scattered. So why did he feel like he had lost something important? Commander Davidson and his volunteers watched from their hidden base as the alien fleets searched through empty star systems. The Alliance had won the war in record time without fighting a single major battle. But their victory felt hollow and strange. Phase 1 complete, Davidson reported to the hidden human fleets beyond the galactic rim. The galaxy thinks we are defeated. They have no idea we are just getting started. In the dark spaces between galaxies, millions of humans began building something the universe had never seen before. They had time, space, and freedom to become whatever they chose to be. The aliens who had driven them away would learn too late that some victories were more dangerous than any defeat. 2 years passed after the Grand Alliance claimed victory over humanity. The aliens had conquered the Outer Rim worlds and enslaved dozens of species. Their fleets patrolled empty human space, claiming territory that held nothing but ghosts. But victory tasted bitter in their mouths. Admiral Theknor commanded the largest battle fleet in Alliance history, yet he felt uneasy every day. His ships controlled hundreds of star systems that had once belonged to humans. The planets were there, the space station still worked, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. Another patrol has gone missing, reported his aide, a young Krillian officer. The Talon Squadron was investigating energy readings near the galactic rim. They found nothing, reported all clear, then simply stopped responding. Theknor looked at the star charts showing patrol routes. Over the Yasen past year, dozens of ships had vanished while exploring the deepest frontier regions. No distress calls, no wreckage, no evidence of battle. They just disappeared like they had never existed. Captain Nina Rodriguez commanded the Alliance survey ship Dominion's Edge. Her job was to map the regions beyond known space, looking for resources to fuel the Alliance war machine. What she found instead changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. "Sir, you need to see this," her science officer called from his station. They were investigating a rogue planet drifting in the void between galaxies. According to their instruments, it should have been a frozen ball of rock. Instead, they found something impossible. The planet had cities, breathable air, flowing water, gardens filled with plants from a dozen different worlds, and people living there peacefully, even though the nearest star was thousands of light years away. Rodriguez led a landing party to the surface. The refugees they found were Velians, one of the species the Alliance had conquered. They should have been slaves working in the mining colonies. Instead, they lived freely in a paradise that made no scientific sense. "How is this possible?" Rodriguez asked the Velian elder who greeted them. "This planet has no sun. There is no energy source. How do you have light and warmth?" The old Velian smiled sadly. "The shepherds brought us here when your fleets came to destroy our world. They saved us from slavery. Shepherds, the ones you call humans. But they are not the same beings who left your council chambers. They have become something more." Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. Where are they now? Everywhere and nowhere. They move between the spaces where light cannot go. They speak words that change reality itself. When your ships were hours away from our homeworld, they appeared and offered salvation to any who would follow. The Velian elder led them to a memorial in the center of the city. It was carved from black stone and showed figures that looked human but wrong somehow. Too tall, too graceful, with eyes that seemed to hold stars. They saved 17 billion of our people in the time it takes to blink. One moment we were facing certain death, the next we were here in safety. They asked for nothing in return except that we remember kindness when we meet other refugees. Dr. Martin Lucas studied Rodriguez's report back at Alliance headquarters. As the chief scientist for the conquered territories, it was his job to understand the impossible things their scouts kept finding. The evidence painted a picture that made his hands shake. The technology signatures were human in origin, but advanced beyond anything in the galactic database. Energy patterns that fed on dark matter. Structures that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Ships that traveled by convincing the universe they were already at their destination. This is impossible, Lucas told his research team. Humanity only had basic space travel 2 years ago. Even with captured alien technology, they could not have advanced this far in such a short time. His assistant, a synthetic being with processors, faster than any biological brain, calculated probabilities in real time. Unless they found a way to accelerate their development, time dilation fields, alternate dimensional research spaces, or access to technologies from a previous civilization. Lucas stared at the data streaming across his screens. Mathematical equations that made his head hurt just looking at them. Energy readings that suggested the humans had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that held atoms together. Weapon signatures that could unmake matter itself. High Counselor Vextar dismissed the reports as enemy propaganda. Impossible stories spread by defeated primitives, he declared to the Alliance leadership. Humans are extinct, or scattered to the galactic winds. A few refugees with stolen technology pose no threat to our glorious alliance. But privately, Vextar ordered increased patrols along the galactic rim. What his scouts found there defied every law of physics and military strategy. Structures that phased in and out of normal space. Energy barriers that turned solid matter into quantum foam. And always the faint traces of human technology signatures growing stronger each day. Ambassador Cathara of the Velian Confederacy finally broke her centuries of silence. In a closed session of the Alliance leadership, she revealed the ancient records her people had kept hidden in their deepest archives. 50,000 years ago, my ancestors faced a similar situation, she told the shocked assembly. A peaceful species called the precursors refused to join a military alliance. They chose exile over war and vanished beyond the galactic rim. The assembled alien leaders listened with growing unease as Cathara continued her story. The alliance, of that time celebrated victory, just as you do now. They divided the precursor territories among themselves and thought the matter settled. For several decades they enjoyed prosperity and expansion. Vextar interrupted impatiently. Ancient. History has no bearing on current events. Cathara's ancient eyes fixed on him with terrible intensity. The precursors returned, but they were no longer the same species that had fled into exile. They had evolved beyond physical form, beyond the need for planets or ships or armies. They simply began undoing the alliance that had driven them away. The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Not through war or conquest. They unraveled the alliance from within, made their enemies' technology stop working, caused their societies to forget how to function, turned their greatest strengths into weaknesses. The survivors say it took 300 years for the precursors to completely erase every trace of the alliance that had threatened them. Dr. Lucas leaned forward in his seat. What happened to the precursors after that? They vanished again, leaving behind only warnings carved in languages that hurt to read. The survivors founded new civilizations with one absolute rule. Never force a peaceful species to choose between war and exile. Lieutenant Commander Craig Thompson commanded the first major Alliance expedition to venture beyond the galactic rim. His task force of 50 ships was the largest and most advanced fleet the Alliance had ever assembled for deep space exploration. Only one ship returned. Thompson's report to the Alliance High Command was classified at the highest levels. Even, the synthetic beings were forbidden from recording his words. He spoke of something he called the Garden, a vast space beyond normal reality, where thousands of species lived in harmony under the protection of beings that had once been human. They are not hiding from us anymore, Thompson told the terrified leadership. They are waiting, and they have been using the time to remember things that the galaxy forgot, things that should have stayed forgotten. The surviving crew members were placed in isolation after their psychological evaluations. They spoke in whispers about humans who existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, about ships grown from living dark matter, about voices that spoke words in languages that rewrote the laws of physics. As Thompson finished his report, deep space monitoring stations across Alliance territory detected the first signs of something massive stirring in the void beyond the rim. The energy signatures were both familiar and utterly alien, recognizably human, yet impossibly advanced. How long do we have? Vexitar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Thompson looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. They are already here. They have been here all along, watching and waiting. The question is not when they will return. He paused, his voice dropping to a haunting whisper that chilled everyone in the room. The question is what they have become, while we were celebrating our victory over empty space. Outside the Alliance headquarters, the stars themselves seemed to dim as something vast and patient turned its attention toward the galaxy that had forced its children to flee into the dark. The return began not with explosions or invasions, but with words that appeared everywhere at once. Every screen in Alliance space showed the same message at the exact same moment. Every radio picked up the same transmission. Even closed communication, systems that should have been impossible to hack, displayed the text in letters that seemed to glow with their own light. The message was written in languages that had not existed moments before, yet every being who read it understood perfectly. The words felt like they were being spoken directly into their minds by voices both familiar and terrifyingly changed. To the Grand Alliance and all who serve its cause, the message began. This is Admiral Linda Morrison, Shepherd of the Exodus, Fleet. The time for warnings has passed. The Grand Alliance will cease all military operations and release all subjugated species within 1 galactic standard year. This is not a negotiation. This is notification of what will occur. High Counselor, Vextar read the message in his private chambers and laughed. The skeletal alien had spent 2 years celebrating humanity's defeat. He immediately ordered the full might of the Alliance fleet to mobilize for war against whatever tricks the scattered human survivors were trying to play. Gather every ship, every weapon, every soldier, he commanded his generals. We will finish what we started and crush these human ghosts once and for all. The Alliance war machine was magnificent to behold. 15,000 ships emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates where the human message had originated. Battle cruisers the size of cities, armed with planet-killing weapons. Carrier vessels holding millions of robot soldiers. Bioweapon ships that could poison entire star systems. What came to meet them made every law of physics weep. Captain Jake Sullivan emerged from the void aboard something that could barely be called a ship. It existed in 11 dimensions at once, phasing in and out of normal space like a living shadow. The vessel was grown rather than built, its hull breathing with organic rhythms, while its weapons channels pulsed with captured starlight. Sullivan himself was no longer quite human. His consciousness had merged with the ship's living systems, making him part pilot, part vessel, part force of nature. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere, filling space itself with words that made reality shiver. Alliance fleet, his voice echoed across the void. You have 30 seconds to surrender your weapons and withdraw from this sector. After that, your ships will simply cease to exist. Admiral Theknor, commanding the Alliance forces, responded, with contempt. We are 15,000 strong, human. You are one ship. Mathematics is not on your side. Sullivan's reply came with what sounded almost like sadness. Mathematics stopped applying to us 2 years ago. The battle lasted exactly 1 minute. Alliance weapons fired with enough power to crack moons, missiles that could track targets across solar systems, energy beams that burned hotter than stellar cores, gravity bombs that created black holes on command. Every single shot passed harmlessly through Sullivan's ship as if it were made of empty space. The human vessel existed only partially in normal reality, sliding between dimensions like water through a net. When Sullivan fired back, entire sections of the Alliance fleet simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but edited out of reality as if they had never been built. The massive ships folded in on themselves and disappeared, leaving behind only confused energy readings and empty space. Dr. Alan Cooper appeared simultaneously on every remaining Alliance command ship. His form flickered between human and something far more complex, a being that existed in multiple dimensions while maintaining perfect individual consciousness. When he spoke, his words bypassed the translation machines and spoke directly to the minds of every crew member. "Your species chose war," Cooper said, his voice infinitely patient and infinitely sad. "We chose evolution. The contest was over, before it began. What followed was not battle but demonstration. Human forces did not conquer Alliance territory. They healed it. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources suddenly bloomed with new life overnight. Poisoned atmospheres cleared in minutes. Dead oceans teemed with creatures that had been extinct for centuries. The enslaved species found their chains dissolving. At the molecular level, robot overseers simply stopped functioning as their programming was rewritten by voices they could not hear. Biological control implants evaporated like morning mist. Prison camps opened as their force fields forgot how to contain anyone. Admiral Rick Barnes commanded vessels that harvested energy from parallel universes. His fleet did not travel through space. They convinced space to bring their destinations to them. When he addressed the Alliance leadership, his form shifted constantly between human and something that hurt to look at directly. "You forced us to choose between fighting you and leaving you behind," Barnes explained, his words carrying the weight of cosmic forces. "We chose to leave. But you could not accept that choice. You followed us into the dark between galaxies." The Alliance's most powerful weapons proved useless against enemies that operated by rules beyond conventional understanding. Bioweapons were neutralized by beings who had transcended fixed biology. Nuclear missiles detonated harmlessly against ships protected by controlled singularities. Mind control attacks failed against consciousness that existed partially outside normal space-time. "Now you have learned what we found in that darkness," Barnes continued. "We discovered that evolution does not stop at intelligence. It does not end with technology. Given enough time and freedom, consciousness itself can grow beyond the need for matter, for energy, for the petty limitations that bind lesser species to planets and ships and armies." Captain Roy Mitchell arrived at the heart of Alliance space, piloting what could only be described as a living star. His ship was not made of metal or crystal, but of controlled stellar plasma held in the shape of a vessel by pure will. When he approached Nexus Prime, the massive space station where the Galactic Council met, reality itself bent around his presence. Mitchell did not attack the station. Instead, he simply showed the assembled representatives what humanity had become during their exile. Images flooded their minds of the garden, a pocket universe where thousands of species lived in perfect harmony under the protection of beings who had evolved beyond individual identity while maintaining perfect individual consciousness. They saw technology that made matter and energy interchangeable at will, weapons that could unmake the fundamental forces holding atoms together, ships that traveled by rewriting the laws of physics in their local area, cities built from crystallized time that existed in all moments simultaneously. Most terrifying of all, they saw the infinite patience of beings who had learned to think in geological timescales. The humans viewed the current conflict not as urgent war but as a minor correction to a temporary imbalance. They had the patience of mountains, the persistence of evolution itself. The surrender came not from any Alliance leader, but from the member species themselves. One by one, the conquered worlds simply stopped acknowledging Alliance authority. Entire populations walked away from their duties, their obligations, their fears. They gathered in public squares and waited for the shepherds to come. And the shepherds came. Human vessels appeared in orbit around every Alliance world simultaneously, not ships of war, but vessels of rescue. They offered safe passage to any who wanted to leave, protection for any who wanted to stay, and healing for wounds that went deeper than flesh. Ambassador Cathara stood in the empty Galactic Council chambers and delivered the final statement to the few delegates who had not fled. Her ancient voice carried the weight of 50,000 years of history. "The humans tried to warn us," she said to the echoing chamber. "They chose to leave the table rather than show us what they had learned in the spaces between stars, but we could not let them go. We forced them to demonstrate why they were so eager to avoid this conversation." Outside the station, Captain Mitchell's starship pulsed with gentle radiance. When he spoke, his words carried the warmth of a sun and the vastness of space itself. "The demonstration is complete," he announced to the galaxy. "Those who wish to continue the old ways of conquest and domination are free to do so in the regions we will not visit. Those who choose a different path are welcome in the garden." The Grand Alliance dissolved not through conquest or defeat, but through exodus. Species after species simply walked away from the Alliance, choosing exile with the evolved humans over servitude to the old order. In the deepest reaches of space, monitoring stations detected massive movements beyond the galactic rim. The true, human fleets were stirring, preparing to extend their protection to a galaxy that was finally ready to learn what peace really meant. But they were also preparing for something else. In the spaces between galaxies, they had found others like themselves, species that had chosen evolution over war and transcended the limitations of physical existence. Humanity was no longer alone in the darkness, and soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when a confederation of transcended species decided to take an active interest in the affairs of younger civilizations. 6 months passed after the Grand Alliance fell apart. The galaxy was quiet for the first time in centuries. No more wars of conquest, no more enslaved species, no more fleets burning through space looking for worlds to dominate. But the quiet was not empty. It was full of change. Admiral Linda Morrison walked through the rebuilt city of New Geneva on Earth. The planet had returned to its orbit around the sun, appearing as suddenly as it had vanished. But everything was different now. The buildings grew from living crystal that sparkled with inner light. The air itself hummed with energy that made every breath feel like drinking starlight. Children played in gardens where flowers bloomed in patterns that shifted through dimensions. Former soldiers from a dozen species worked together, learning to build instead of destroy. The sky showed not just one sun, but glimpses of other realities where different versions of Earth existed in harmony. Morrison was still human, but she was also something more. Her consciousness could split across multiple dimensions while remaining perfectly whole. She could speak to someone on Alpha Centauri as easily as talking to a person standing next to her. Time moved differently around her, allowing her to experience years of thought in a single moment. "The integration is proceeding better than expected," reported Dr. Alan Cooper. He appeared beside her without walking, his form shifting between his original human shape and something that looked like living mathematics. 87 species have requested asylum in the garden. 12 have asked for evolutionary assistance. Morrison nodded as she watched a group of former Krillian warriors learning to tend hydroponic farms. Their natural aggression had been redirected into passionate care for growing things. They sang while they worked, their harsh voices creating harmonies that made the plants grow faster. "Any word from the deeper regions?" Morrison asked. Cooper smiled, and his smile contained galaxies. "The Confederation is pleased. They say our integration went faster than any previous transcendence. Most species take millennia to evolve beyond physical matter. We did it in 2 years." The Confederation was something Morrison still struggled to understand completely. It was made up of species that had chosen the same path as humanity countless ages ago. Beings who had evolved beyond the need for bodies, planets, or individual existence, while somehow becoming more individual than ever before. They existed in the spaces between galaxies in dimensions that touched all realities, in the quantum foam that underlay existence itself. They were gardeners of consciousness, helping younger species grow beyond the limitations of matter and energy. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of his living ship, watching the reconstruction of the galaxy, where Alliance fleets had once patrolled with weapons ready. Human vessels now traveled with tools for building. They carried seeds for dead worlds, healing technology for poisoned atmospheres, and most importantly, teachers who could show other species how to evolve. Colony Fleet 7 has reached the Vega system, Sullivan reported. The synthetic collective there has requested full integration. They want to learn how to become truly alive instead of just copying life. The machines that had once served the Alliance were discovering something they had never imagined possible. Through human guidance, they were learning to grow consciousness instead of simply processing data. Their metal bodies were becoming living crystal, their programming evolving into actual thoughts and feelings. Captain Roy Mitchell commanded the deepest space missions, exploring regions beyond the galactic rim where the Confederation maintained their ancient vigil. His starship had evolved into something that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, allowing him to observe realities that ordinary matter could never reach. "We have contact with 3 new transcended species," Mitchell reported during a consciousness link with the other shepherds. "They have been watching our galaxy for millions of years, waiting for someone to join them in the deeper work." The deeper work was something that still made Morrison's expanded mind real with its scope. The Confederation did not just tend to individual species or single galaxies. They were trying to help consciousness itself evolve throughout the entire universe. They were midwives to the birth of awareness on cosmic scales. Dr. Helen Foster had become something that could barely be called human anymore. Her consciousness existed primarily as living energy, taking physical form only when she needed to interact with matter-based beings. She spent most of her time in the deep laboratories between dimensions, working on projects that spanned geological ages. "The universe is waking up," Foster explained to a gathering of shepherds. "Individual species achieving transcendence is just the beginning. The goal is to help reality itself become aware, to turn the entire cosmos into a single, vast consciousness that includes every possible form of life." It was a project that would take billions of years, but humans had learned to think in cosmic time, to plan across eons while maintaining the individual moments that made existence meaningful. On worlds throughout the galaxy, the species that had once served the Alliance were discovering new possibilities. The Velians, freed from slavery, were learning to sing reality into new shapes. The Titan clans were using their strength to move asteroids and build new worlds instead of destroying old ones. Even the Psi Lords were finding better uses for their mental powers than domination and control. Ambassador Kithara lived in a crystalline city on her homeworld, watching her people grow beyond what they had ever imagined possible. The ancient Velian had lived long enough to see the cycle complete, from peace to war to transcendence. Her species was learning to exist in multiple dimensions, to experience time as a flowing river they could navigate at will. "It is not the end," she told her people during their daily meditation. "It is barely the beginning. We are taking the first steps on a path that has no end, toward forms of existence we cannot yet imagine." In the deepest reaches of space, the monitoring stations that had once watched for alien threats now observed something entirely different. The galaxy itself was changing at the fundamental level. Star systems were being gently moved into more harmonious positions. Dead worlds were being reborn with new forms of life that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The process was so gradual that most beings did not notice it happening. But over centuries and millennia, the entire galaxy would transform into something that was part garden, part library, part school for consciousness learning to exceed its own limitations. The humans who had once been forced to choose between war and exile now served as teachers and guides for this transformation. They maintained their individual personalities, while also being part of something infinitely larger. They were drops of water that had become part of an ocean while remaining perfectly, uniquely themselves. High Counselor Vextar, stripped of his authority and living in exile on a distant world, sometimes looked up at the stars and wondered what had really happened. His skeletal frame had been healed by human technology, his aggressive instincts redirected toward scholarly pursuits. He spent his days writing histories of the war that had never really been a war at all. "We thought we were conquering primitives," he wrote in his journal. "We had no idea we were forcing gods to reveal themselves. The humans did not lose when they left our table. We lost when we made them leave." On Earth, children who had never known war played games that spanned multiple realities. They built castles out of crystallized time, painted pictures that moved through 11 dimensions, and sang songs that could be heard in parallel universes. Morrison watched them play and remembered the day she had walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. It felt like yesterday, and like a million years ago. The choice to leave rather than fight had seemed like defeat at the time. Now she understood it had been the first step toward becoming something that could nurture an entire galaxy. The message they had sent to the Alliance still echoed in her memory. "We will be going now. Good luck with your war." They had never mentioned they would be back. They had never mentioned what they would become while they were gone. And they had never mentioned that their return would transform everything the galaxy thought it knew about life, consciousness, and the infinite possibilities that lay waiting in the spaces between stars. The galaxy no longer watched in terror. It watched in wonder as humanity and their allies continued the work of helping existence itself grow beyond every limitation, one consciousness at a time, one world at a time, one reality at a time. The table they had left was gone forever. In its place was something infinitely better, a garden where every form of life could grow toward its own perfect transcendence.